Hi, I'm Shannon Watkins, and I'm here today with Professor Mark McNeilly. Professor McNeilly teaches marketing and organizational behavior at UNC-Chapel Hill. He recently co-authored a research study with two other UNC-Chapel Hill professors, Jennifer Larson and Timothy J. Ryan. Their paper is entitled Free Expression and Constructive Dialogue at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. We're here to discuss today the findings of their research. Mark, thank you so much for coming here to speak with me today.
You're welcome. Happy to be here.
So Mark, what motivated you and your colleagues to undertake this research?
Sure. Well, there's been a lot of discussion on campus, in the state, nationwide, about free speech, free expression, constructive dialogue at colleges and universities. And a lot of that conversation has really provided more heat than light. And so we wanted to better understand those issues at our university, UNC. And we also saw an opportunity to conduct the study in ways that would introduce new information into this conversation. And I'd add one interesting tidbit about our research group. We represent different disciplines: political science, English, as well as business. I'm a business person, as well as different views politically. So we represent views from across the political spectrum, and yet we were able to work together to produce this research. And I thought that was kind of a neat thing.
No, that really is a neat thing. So tell me a little bit about how you conducted the study.
Sure. The main instrument for the research was a survey that was offered to all UNC undergrads. And it was augmented by three very small focus groups with politically active organizations on campus. And the research was initiated by the three of us. We did ask the provost office for funding, and they did do that. That was primarily for the incentives, which I'll talk about. But there was no external funding for the research. This was internally funded. So we ran the survey in two waves. The first wave was an incentivized approach. We wanted to ensure we got a representative sample of the student body. We got 519 responses, which was about a 26% completion rate. That we then opened it up to the rest of the undergrads at UNC, non-incentivized, and we got another 568 responses, a 3% response rate or completion rate, which was pretty good. And that gave us a total of 1,087 responses, which we felt pretty good about. And then we took those findings, drafted a report, shared it with some peers at the university, as well as around the country, that we felt would be helpful for us. And then we wrote the final report.
Okay, wow. So in your study, you and your colleagues found that 30.8% of students feel they've become more liberal during their college years. 15.9% feel they have become more conservative. But 47.8% feel their ideological leanings have not changed. So you conclude that there might be moderate change in students' views, but for the most part, they seem to remain stable.
Yeah.
So I have a follow-up question about that.
Yeah.
So Acadia University professor Jeffrey Sachs wrote an article debunking the idea that professors indoctrinate their students, which is definitely a common claim.
Right.
He says the worst fears of conservatives, that liberal faculty are brainwashing their students, are simply not true. He continues, attending a university or college has little to no influence on a student's partisan or political identity. Do you believe your findings support Sachs' claim?
I think our research, it did show a little bit more movement to the liberal side than the conservative side, but then, as you said, the majority of about half the people basically didn't change. And overall, I think our research really didn't provide any strong support that professors are indoctrinating students. If we look at the data, students respondents said that in classes where politics does come up, the majority of UNC professors do try to discuss both sides of the political issues and encourage opinions from across the political spectrum. A little bit of data to kind of support that. When asked whether instructors encouraged participation from liberals and conservatives alike, 54% of the respondents agreed. And these are the students. 42% chose a neutral response. For example, thought the question was irrelevant, and only about 4% disagreed with that statement. And even among students who identify as conservative, only about 11% disagreed. And overall, the findings we got back were that professors were doing a pretty good job, generally, according to most of the students responding, with handling issues from across the political spectrum and allowing different opinions to be heard.
Well, that's great to hear. So let's talk about some of your other findings now. You found that students across the political spectrum sometimes engage in self-censorship and fear of what others may think or do. But you found that self-censorship is more prevalent among conservative students.
Yes.
Could you discuss these findings and why is it important to find out why students self-censor and how many do it?
Sure. Overall, we found that within the classes that discuss politics, students, liberals, moderates, and conservatives were concerned that if they shared their sincere beliefs in class, the professor would have potentially a lower opinion of them. That was about 25% of the students. Professors might lower their grade. That was about 16% of the students. Peers would have a lower opinion of them. That was 40%. Or peers would do something or say something on social media. So that was about 19%. And so one of the themes we kind of found is that students seem to be more concerned about what peers would do than what their professors would do, which we thought was pretty interesting. And then as a result, about 36% of the respondents engaged in self-censorship at least once during the semester. Another 25% said they did it multiple times. And as you mentioned, for conservatives, the self-censorship was more prevalent. About 24% of the liberal students self-censored, while about 68% of conservative students reported self-censoring. And to your question about, well, why is this important? The mission of the university is really this search for truth and knowledge. And of course, given that, it's not optimal if a lot of students are afraid to share their views. And it's only by hearing others' views, weighing different views, we can learn more and try to determine, what is truth, what knowledge do we think we have or do not have.
That's fascinating. You also found that students harbor divisive stereotypes about one another.
Yes.
What kind of stereotypes?
Yeah. We found a couple of things, that students were hesitant to apply positive attributes to their outgroup. So liberals applying them to conservatives, conservatives to liberals. So 28% of respondents who identify as conservative say that their liberal peers are open-minded. So it's only about 28% thought that they were open-minded. Only 8% of liberal respondents said that conservatives were open-minded, conservative students. And this is students talking about students, not generally about conservatives, but conservative students. The negative attributes are very commonly applied. So more than 65% of respondents who identify as liberals say that their conservative peers are either racist or sexist. And more than 75% of respondents who identify as conservative say their liberal peers are condescending. Obviously, that's not really great if we're trying to ensure constructive dialogue and free expression among students.
No, exactly. Yeah. You also report that over 25% of students endorse blocking a speaker they disagree with. Now, that isn't a tiny minority of students who are in favor of shutting down speakers. And yet there haven't been shutdowns on campus in recent years, at least to my recollection. So they don't seem to be acting on that belief. Are you surprised by these findings?
Not really. So we've actually had 2 incidents in the pit. That's the area where a lot of students kind of hang out, and sometimes political groups will post signage. This was in 2019. So in one incident in 2019, a female student stole the sign of a pro-life group. She was arrested. In another last year, a female student actually physically assaulted a member of a pro-life group. She was also arrested. In our focus groups, I had a very liberal student who said he wanted to attend a conservative speaker, but when he went to go actually into the event, he was kind of intimidated by the students out there protesting. He said, "Maybe this isn't really worth it, so I'm just gonna not go." So yeah, I think there is some of that. I think probably the high level. I think sometimes we focus too much on the high level speakers piece of this and miss a lot of what's happening day to day.
Okay, no, that's important to have in mind.
Yep.
Okay, so let's talk about some of the recommendations you offer. what are some ways colleges, and UNC-Chapel Hill in particular, what are some ways they can remind students about the importance of free speech and respectful discourse?
Yeah. Well, there's a couple thoughts we have here. The first is to ensure that from the start, students recognize the importance of free speech and are given tools for constructive dialogue to engage productively in it. Then hopefully you wouldn't see things like I just talked about happening in the pit. That can begin in orientation. We think it should take place there. But a lot of stuff's going on in orientation, right? So you also need to continue to reinforce this throughout the students' time at UNC. So much like we have training, sometimes mandatory for other important issues, for example, sexual harassment is a very important issue. Perhaps there could be ongoing communications too, and training for students and faculty on their rights, but also their responsibilities in this area. This could be augmented by voluntary opportunities for students and faculty to improve their constructive dialogue skills by various organizations and groups on campus. There are a lot of groups that are very good at this. And then lastly, the second thought we had was really about maybe it's easier to be accepting of someone else's political views if we first get to know them as people. And so the idea is that the university could work with groups on campus to provide opportunities where students from across the political spectrum have an opportunity to just meet each other and interact as individuals, not even get into the political piece, and understand that, yeah, these are humans that I'm dealing with here and not the caricatures that I kind of may have in my head of who my political opponent is.
No, those are fantastic ideas. You also, I found this very interesting. You also suggest the creation of a campus office that would organize opportunities for students to learn from different speakers, such as organizing debates, panels, forums, lectures. I've been reading this book by George Lanou. He's the author of Silent Stages.
Oh, yeah.
And he argues that there should be more policy debates and discussions on campus. He notes that sometimes the problem isn't shutting down speakers, it's sometimes not inviting them in the first place.
Yeah.
And so it seems like your proposal for a campus office dedicated to this task would help address that problem. Could you talk more about the logistics of how it would work and what it would do?
Sure. This is just a thought, just a proposal. So we currently rely on professors, students, administrators to invite these speakers, and the practice might result in an imbalance of views, of speaker views. And so this potential implementation would be this creation of a campus office that would potentially report to and be funded by the provost's office, have the mission of organizing these campus events, where there could be debates, forums, panels, lectures on important political, social, cultural topics, with speakers representing views from across the ideological spectrum, with an eye towards slating events with speakers perhaps that you may not usually see. And one of the things I think is very important here, though, is you wouldn't want to invite provocateurs, right? We know the provocateurs that often sometimes come in are invited by groups on the right. You would want people that have reasoned thought, have done the research, have evidence-based material, and bring those people in, because that's fitting with our mission as a university, right? We look for evidence. We're in the search for research to support your claims. So this organization, I don't think it'd have to be very big, could publicize these events on campus, record them with the purpose of perhaps sharing them online, encourage connections between the speakers and classroom discussion. Because I think it's good to augment a lot of what happened. Speakers one thing, but can we have a discussion later in a class? And then sure, the events are open and available to all students, faculty, staff, public that want to attend.
Well, I look forward to seeing if any sort of proposal comes forward in the future.
Sure.
Are there any other parts of your research or recommendations that you would like to highlight?
I think we've kind of hit the main points. What I would like to focus more, kind of go back to what we started on, is the three professors, again, coming from different disciplines. We're very big on cross-discipline work and very different political viewpoints, really able to initiate this research and work together over a lot of months to produce the report. And we had a lot of interesting conversations, and I'm sure we'll continue to. But I think this shows that there are professors at UNC from across the political spectrum that care about free speech and constructive dialogue, and I think that's good. And that we can work together constructively and develop ideas to improve the university. And I think that speaks well of many of the people we have at UNC.
Well, that's fantastic. I want to thank you and your colleagues for conducting this research. You've provided very helpful data and insight in how we can, continue to promote free speech and civil discourse on campus. And like you said, that is very central to the mission of university in the first place. So thank you.
Yeah, you bet. And we're actually looking at extending this, continuing the research every couple of years with the students, but actually extending it to faculty, maybe administrators, also potentially graduate students as well, because there's a significant number of those on campus as well. So keep your eyes open.
No, we definitely will. We'll definitely keep our eyes out for that future research.
Yeah.
Mark, thank you very much.
Thank you.